Now, while soaring food and commodity prices have led to unrest, protests, even helped fuel revolutions in other parts of the world, it's unclear how American consumers are going to react to the latest warnings coming from our retailers, food companies, and manufacturers. The news is that this year, expect prices to rise. As the prices of everything from cotton to copper to corn, sugar, wheat, beef, pork, and coffee edge up, companies are seeing their profits take a dive when comparing the third and fourth quarters of last year. So many companies are now saying that their only option is going to be to stop absorbing those costs and push them on to the consumer. Now that includes Procter & Gamble, Kraft Foods, Polo, Ralph Lauren, and Hanes, just to name a few. But with unemployment still high, how are the people going to react? And how much of the rise in costs can we blame on Wall Street speculation? Here to discuss it with me is Anthony Randazzo, Director of Economic Research for the Reason Foundation. Anthony, thanks for coming on.
Absolutely.
Now, when we hear that prices are going to start rising this year, which means they're going to be higher than they already are, how much of a rise can we really expect? What are people predicting?
Obviously, it depends on exactly what the products you're talking about. And the last time we saw a price rise like this, 2000 and going into 2007 and 2008, the price of my pizza went from $5 for 2 slices in New York to $5.50 for 2 slices. So it's going to be incremental. You're not going to see prices double by any means, but it's going to be noticeable, particularly on foods, since foodstuffs typically are the leading indicator. That's where, when commodity prices start to go up, that's where the prices first start to get hit. And if you are a low-income individual in America already struggling in the midst of this recession, you're probably going to notice your food bill going up more this year. And if you are a more affluent American, you may not really notice it at all.
Well, yeah, for those that are struggling right now, that's definitely not what they want to hear. But should we have seen this coming, right? I mean, you could say that the food prices have been on the rise gradually. And the way that these companies are painting it right now is that last year they absorbed all the costs because they were too scared the consumers weren't going to buy anything, especially during the depths of the recession. And now they're feeling, I guess, a little more confident, you could say?
Well, okay, so market analysts have seen this coming. And if you think about it this way, the amount of liquidity that the Fed has tried to push into the economy over the last several years has got to be spent on something. And the amount of debt that the Fed has bought from hedge funds and from banks, investment groups, the toxic debt that they've tried to get out, well, that gives those organizations cash that they need to then spend. So now, that doesn't necessarily mean that every toxic mortgage that's bought buys commodities, but some of that's going there. So smart commodities investors, smart investors, it's looked at all this money coming in. Some of it's going to wind up getting pushed towards investments in commodities, and that's begun to push up prices. I mean, so ironically, what the government's trying to do to stimulate the economy has, in fact, helped to stimulate commodities prices. And so if you are a good market analyst, you would have seen this coming. For the regular, everyday consumer, you're not following Wall Street, obviously, it's going to be a little bit of a blindside.
But how detrimental is that, the fact that investors are now looking at commodities, perhaps even looking at food? A lot of people are, pointing at firms like J.P. Morgan or Goldman Sachs for, speculation when it comes to food prices or the prices of wheat or corn. I mean, how much has just that boosted?
So you can't blame it all on Wall Street, obviously. I mean, I know it's much fun, but you got to blame some of it on God too. The weather. The droughts and fires in Russia impacted wheat prices. The flood in Australia had incredible impact on foodstuffs prices around the world. I mean, we don't like to pay attention to that other than to just show pictures, but that actually does impact the bottom line at the grocery store when it's something like a fifth of the continent underwater. When you have events like that are unpredictable, it is difficult necessarily to see how far this stuff's going to go. You can't blame it all on Wall Street, and it's not necessarily detrimental that that's where money is going either. Right now, it's not like prices are at astronomical, unheard of prices. We're just back at 2007 levels, actually, if you look at exactly where the price index are, and it spiked in 2008. We've of level that we're not going to be able to handle, that we should be incredibly worried. But we should know that even in a deflationary economy, that there are concerns about the future. Will inflation kick in? Some of this could be on fears that inflation is going to drive up these prices, and so it's just anticipating that. There's a lot of factors that are coming here, so I don't think we can be so worried about Wall Street just sort of gaming this system.
But do you think that it's fair The people are worried right now considering what we've seen go on in the rest of the world. You know, what we've seen go on in Tunisia and Egypt. Now, granted, America is a bit of a different situation, but still you see a lot of people that are educated and that are worried right now because their food prices are soaring because they can't afford the basic necessities. And so it's hard to look at what's going around in the rest of the world and not get scared that what if the same thing happens here?
Yeah, I mean, I doubt we're going to see Tunisian, Egypt, Iranian-style protests here over food. But I would hope that the American people, smart people, start paying attention to stimulative activities by the government as more than just trying to help them, as potentially hurting them, and to actually pay attention to when the Federal Reserve releases their statements every month or 2 months, depending on when their meetings, on what they're going to do about inflation, whether or not they are going to pull back their quantitative easing program, because what they do there is going to impact the bottom line of how much you spend at the grocery store. And paying attention to that is probably the most that any American citizen can do, other than ask Ron Paul to question the Fed more. But I don't think we're going to get crazy riots.
All right, yeah, I'm all for paying attention, absolutely. So hopefully everyone was paying really close attention to what you were telling us just now. All right, Anthony, thank you so much for joining us. And yeah, hopefully it'll just be a couple cents that things go up and not.
Maybe Ron Paul saves your food budgets.
Thanks.